Hello, everyone. This is Rex Crandell, and I'm going to be one half of your teachers today. The other half is Tamara Brown. I'll introduce her in a second. We take different subjects in the course, and we've divided it up that way. She'll teach about half the time. I'll teach about half the time. I'm a CPA and an attorney and real estate broker and other things, and I'll talk more about the financial side. Tanner Brown's a tax repair and a licensed legal document assistant, and she'll take more of the technical stuff about petitions and that type of thing. But this course is, we teach it, we've taught it for about 8 years now. We teach it with the Contra Costa County Law Library. The judges like it because they get reports that are better for them, and was originally designed for pro per litigants, people that are representing themselves. Although we have from time to time professionals, attorneys, legal document assistants, and fiduciaries taking the class. Everybody's welcome. What we're going to do is teach most of it on judicial counsel forms. We have another format that we're also going to explain. If you want to do fiduciary accounting as a service, as part of your business, there's no state license for it. You do not need a tax license. You do not need to be a CPA or an enrolled agent or an attorney. And the petition for court approval should be done. I mean, if it's done pro per, that's fine. It could also be done with the assistance of a legal document assistant or a law firm. And when you do the accounting, we tell our clients that we're dealing with trustees, executors, and fiduciaries, that sometimes it's good to get a court approval, and that takes the liability off of the fiduciary for claims. This fiduciary accounting is required for guardians, conservators, and probate. It's optional for trusts, but when you turn something into a court for a trust, it must be in this format. Tamara. So I'm going to get Tamara to get started here. She went to get a cup of coffee, I think. I think she got impatient with me and took off, but we'll get her back here in a second. Tamara.
Just said it. You talked.
I can't hear you. Okay. This is Tamara Brown.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. Sorry, he puts the mouse on the left and I need it on the right. So, good morning. I actually am going to turn up the volume so I can hear you guys a little bit. It's really helpful for me. So I'm going to ask each one of you, to individually tell me who you are and what actually, are you a pro per or are you a fiduciary trying to learn or understand the accounting? Because technically the class is done for pro pers, and so I can change it a little bit if there are no pro pers in the class and change it a tiny bit for those kind of learning about the accounting. But if there is a pro per in the class, I'm going to have to switch and only do it as if I'm teaching a pro per, and it's a tiny bit different. So how about Jamay? I'm sorry if I didn't say that right.
Hi, good morning. Sorry, I clicked it to unmute and then it went back to mute. So hi, good morning. My name's Jamay Benvenuto. Sorry, you guys, you don't get the quick one. I am a self-litigator. so I'm in pro per.
Okay,
I have been a conservator since 2018. I
okay,
take care of my uncle, and this is the last thing I need to file with the courts. And I'm in LA County, and they don't offer any classes like this. So I'm glad you guys offer a class like this because it's expensive.
yes, and I do lots of accountings for down south, so yes, I
Okay.
fully understand. What
Yeah.
courtroom, are you at Stanley Mosque or, yep?
Yeah.
They're
Yeah.
actually, believe it or not, one of the nicer courthouses down there. I don't see a whole lot of pushback on accountings. Nothing like Orange, nothing like San Diego.
Yeah.
Those are your much more difficult ones that you literally have to dot every I and cross every T on those. But actually, Stanley Mosque, they have some really nice judges there. So lucky you.
Yeah.
Great, nice to meet you. And so I will be tailoring the class towards you, which makes it easier. And
she's a conservator?
yes,
Okay.
for an uncle. And so how about Tracy, hun?
Hi, I work with Danielle.
Hi.
Danielle, I'm doing my first court accounting in less than a month. And so this is very helpful. And so it's fiduciary, I believe, but Danielle will be able to explain more why I'm tagging along.
Okay. Hi, Diane. I see her cute little laugh. Why I'm tagging along. Hi, Danielle. How are you? Go ahead.
Hello. I'm a licensed professional fiduciary. We're
Uh-huh.
in Orange County, but I do cases in San Diego and LA, a few different places, but we're primarily in Orange County. And yes, Tracy
I feel
is
for you, girl. I feel for you.
actually. I'll be on. Orange County. We don't have a problem in Orange County. We like LA. We like LA. We're good in Orange County. Riverside County, no, thank you. Those are that's the county.
I hear you on that too. Riverside, no, yeah. I have quite a few in Riverside also, and
Yeah,
it can
they
be.
do not. They don't like outsiders. They
Yeah.
really don't.
Yep, I hear you. So, okay.
So we have a variety of cases coming up, and what's interesting, I was thinking about it last night. I think sometimes too, doing court accountings for dead people makes a difference.
Yes.
You get
Right.
less
So
complaints
we've got.
that
So
way.
Rex said you get less complaints that way.
Yes, but a final accounting to us is different, of course. Like when we're doing an accounting for a conservatorship that's ongoing, it'll be different than doing one for a conservatorship that's done, or doing one. We've got one that it's actually a small probate. I mean, it's considered a small case, so it won't even go into probate.
Yeah.
So,
and I will tell you there is only a tiny subtle difference between and I would call that more like a trust style accounting when you're doing a small estate because it's not going through court. There's a tiny bit of difference. One, you can use a cover sheet instead, or like an Excel created cover sheet instead of the GC 400. You have a notice that goes on the back of that, which we won't be teaching in this class. The notice just states to anybody receiving a copy that they have so many days to file a complaint or contest or whatever. And so there's a few subtle differences between that and what actually has to be submitted to a court, because when it's submitted to the court, technically you really don't have to give that notice because you give them a copy of the petition and then they have a chance to contest it within all of that. It has to have a separate GC 400 form, whereas the others don't, but all in all, they are pretty much the same. I do them the same anyway, and whether it's a final closing case or a continuing case, I myself, that makes no difference to me. I do them exactly the same. It's, you just get into really technical things when there's money that moves all over the place, and stuff like that. So that's your difficult one, but I think you'll really enjoy some of this. Keep in mind, I'm going to start at the beginning, more for the pro per and how you even get to the accounting point. So that will be something that I don't know if, you probably already know it, but I'm still going to run through it. So what will happen is I start at the inventory and appraisal because that's the first place and the only place, and it's everything to start your accounting. And then Rex will move into the actual accounting portion, and then I'll come back and just run through the petition and how the accounting actually gets filed. So your steps might be a tiny bit different, but all in all, they kind of will be the same, right? But I'm going to add a few little tips and tricks or things to look for, especially when possibly your accounting isn't matching. That's always the most difficult thing when you don't, you can't get it to balance. But besides that, and then what I look at when, because I do also review a few accountings, especially if they're difficult ones. In fact, I did 2 yesterday from propers who took the class that said, hey, I did this accounting, let me please just glance at it, let me know if it will pass, and things of that nature. So I'll go through that. So I'm going to slide the screen. Please don't let me make you dizzy when I move to the next slide. Oh, where is this? Is it the normal handout?
Okay, do I have the thumbnails on the right?
Where?
Do you see the thumbnails underneath the student pictures on the right screen?
Yeah, okay.
Is that what you're looking for?
Yes, that's what I'm looking for.
Yeah, there you go.
Sorry, I'm on a different machine than mine, so I
You could
okay,
find-
so the first thing that we're gonna start with is again the inventory and appraisal for and it's Jamea, right? Or Jamea? Jamea?
Janae.
Oh, Jamea. Okay, I may screw that up. Sorry,
It's
but
okay.
yes,
It's
I'll
okay.
get there. So honey, you've probably done this, or if you haven't, again, this is the inventory and appraisal. This is the document I always start with when I'm doing the court accounting. Have you completed your inventory and appraisal already?
I did. Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah. And I filed it and the judge approved it or
Perfect. Okay,
granted it,
yes,
so-
you submitted it. So again, I really won't then have to run through much of the inventory and appraisal then portion, unless the ladies from the fiduciary want me to go over, like usually within the class, I'll go over what's the difference between a partial, a final, a supplemental, or a corrected, or a reappraisal. But if you all are good, then I can skip all of that.
For the moment, ours have already been completed, and because we do work with attorneys on this, I don't know, Tracy, do you want her to talk through it or not worry about that right now?
I think I got a little bit of an understanding by looking through this yesterday. So unless there's any tricks or anything that I need to be really aware of, I think that's the because most of this is done through other people for us.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so then I will just start with the line items where they come from. Like, for instance, the first thing I'm looking at when I do start my accounting, because once we move to the accounting, you'll see that, is I'm looking for my cash assets, which are in attachment 1, and my non-cash assets, which are attachment 2. Attachment 2 can only be valued by the probate referee, and attachment 1 is only valued by you. And so I'm going to go through a few little differences in what should be on attachment 1 as opposed to what should be on attachment 2. This is the only part of the inventory and appraisal I will look at before I start my accounting. I don't care about any of this other portions or anything else on the inventory and appraisal. I go directly to this. Again, the one little tricky thing is on an inventory and appraisal, realize to if you're doing your first accounting, your start date is going to be whatever date is here, whether it's date of death, date of appointment, or date of conservatorship, date of guardianship. So whatever date is right here is the date I start the accounting. Now, if you have this date wrong, then of course it throws everything going forward wrong. So again, this date right here will be date of death, date of appointment, which means the DE 140 or the order stating you were appointed, either the guardian or the conservator. Now, recently, specifically down in Los Angeles, and so I'd say Riverside, Orange County, the examiners have gotten a little bit pickier about what does this date mean. So I've had quite a few petitions I've gone through with accountings that I have always in the past used the date of appointment or the date of the order that was signed by the judge, meaning you were responsible for the cash on that date or the assets on that date you were appointed. So a lot of times if your date of, so like a conservatorship, it's not, this date right here is not the date that you filed the petition to be a conservator, or when the person became incapacitated, or when the person had an accident or things of that nature, which a lot of people use. But specifically in probate, when you have a decedent's estate, date of death as opposed to date of appointment can be a big long time, right? Some people, there's a date of death and they don't think they have, or don't know who's going to do it, so they wait years and years and years before they actually file a probate, so their order is going to come much later. Typically, I've always used this as the date of appointment or the date an order was received. But now the examiners are coming back and saying, no, you have to use the date of death regardless of when the appointment was. So to tackle that, what they want me to do, what I have just done is added a supplement in the petition, and we'll get to the petition last, that says, the date of death was this date, but I was not able, or they were not able to take control of any assets until this date. So the accounting starts on this date, or I'll back up the accounting till the date of death and then say there was no change between this date and this date, even though I don't know it. Because one, the person typically cannot get bank statements prior to their order or appointment because the bank says that's confidential information. And two, you weren't responsible if cash came in or left or whatever anyway. But So that's one little tiny trick that you may get more often now is the examiners wanting a different start date. So I'm going to move to the attachment 1, which should list cash only. Remember that it would be cash if found on the conservatee at the time of appointment. Typically, if you have older people, they always have cash on them, whereas younger people, and I'm not sure if I'm the older or the younger, but I never have cash on me. So it's a different generation completely. I also would never state on, as in this example, cash found at their residence and give an address. No, this is public information. I don't need to put the conservatee possibly at risk that somebody else gets this information and knows he carries cash at his house all the time. So I myself usually would just say cash, not where, but cash, and then an amount. Bank account information, always remember, never give the full account number. Again, this is public information. I only give the last 4 or 5 digits. I don't list the address of the bank and things of that nature either. But this starting value is very important. And why I say that, I've seen a lot of times where I get an inventory and appraisal, right? And then I get also bank statements and I'm going to start my accounting. And the first thing I'm looking at again is this date right here. And most of the time bank statements run from like March 1st to March 31st. Let's just use that example. So this date is right smack in the middle. Banks are better now than they used to in that on the statement, they'll list almost a daily balance, which is very helpful for you. But back a little while ago, they didn't used to give that daily balance. So what I would have to do is either start with March 1st and then add deposits and subtract distribution or subtract expenses and then come up with a total. So now it makes it much easier. But what is really you have to make sure you do is if this says March 1st, March 8th, on your bank statement or on this attachment 1, this balance is not on the March 1st, which would be the beginning balance. This balance is actually on March 8th. Otherwise, you are never going to get your accounting to match. So again, one of the tips I do when I'm looking or reviewing an accounting is the first thing I'll look at is what does the inventory and appraisal say? Then I'll look at the bank statement and go, okay, what is the balance? Figure out the balance on that date, March 8th. And then if it's this same thing, I'm like, great, okay, that's the balance. I'm going to start with my beginning asset balances. This is the #1 thing when I cannot or somebody cannot get their stuff to balance. That is usually the error. Either this number is wrong because it's a different, they started it, like say for instance, they looked at a bank statement on March 1st and that was the balance. They just put it without trying to calculate, deposits or expenses. And you cannot do that. If when you're doing it, and I'm talking more, well, the fiduciaries do their own, but if it's done wrong, say you recorded the wrong number and it doesn't match, what has to happen is you have to go back and file a corrected inventory and appraisal. And I've had to have many clients do that. They had to file a corrected because I have to look at a bank statement going off a bank statement. And if my bank statement does not match this inventory and appraisal that's already turned in and reported to the court, because that's what they're looking at also, I can never balance. And so you literally have to go back and say, I need a corrected inventory and appraisal. You submit that and then you go forward on your accounting. So that's just one thing to watch for and look at. this is balance savings account, same thing. Make sure your number is on the date that's reported in the box on here, right here. I'm gonna refer to that a bunch. If there's any CDs are difficult, especially when you're trying for somebody who has possibly an older person who is incapacitated. They may not know this information. So for anybody doing this, you would have to do a tiny bit of digging because those aren't an obvious. You're not getting a statement, you know, they're just more difficult to figure out if they do have them. Back in the day when this example was created, people used to get cash as pensions, you know, monthly cash. Now everybody does direct deposit. So typically there isn't uncashed checks. But I do see this a little bit in dividends, which they're getting better at that also, where which is the next one, where the mutual companies would send dividend checks to the people every month and they would need to cash them. Now, again, they've kind of moved a whole lot to direct deposit, and I've not seen many where they've received checks and people are reporting checks. So again, make sure that you have recorded all of your cash assets, because all of these will go on your beginning assets when you're starting your accounting. So I always make sure I read right off here, and this is where I start. But again, with bank balances, I have to verify with the bank statement. Any questions on the cash attachment one and how it relates to how we're going to start the accounting?
I have a question.
Yes, son.
Okay, so my uncle has a savings account with Chase.
Mhm.
And I have the bank statements for the period I'm doing this for the court. He doesn't have anything else on besides the Social Security Administration. Like he gets a check from them and that's what I deposit. So I would only need to like
You're only
list
going to have
the
then 2 items. You won't have all of it. You will only have what you have. So you would only, if there's a checking account and a savings, or if there's only one account, then you would only have one account, and then that's all you would account for. You would not have any uncashed checks unless you're stating you deposit checks. Then if there was one, again, this inventory and appraisal is one day. It's not the next day, or it's one day. So the day you got appointed, you walked in and you found this, right? What happens 2 weeks later, 3 weeks later, checks that come in? That's a totally different subject. That's for the accounting. This is on the day you were appointed. What did you have? Again, a lot of times people will not realize or know what they have. So specifically, if you did the inventory and appraisal and then you found an uncashed check 3 weeks later or after you turned in your inventory and appraisal, that only becomes a receipt now. It's just deposited. You would not redo your whole inventory and appraisal for that uncashed check. No, you would just deposit it now, and that's a receivable on your accounting. Does that help?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
So I'm gonna move to attachment 2, which is non-cash assets. These are if there's real property. In this case, we have a vacation property. I don't actually record household furniture and furnishings unless somebody tells me it's expensive or antiques, and I will list that individually. Typically, a probate referee gives very little value to these items. I guess I would change that if I knew I had a family that was very contentious, and they want to see every single thing because they know somebody's trying to steal something. Then again, I probably still wouldn't, list a whole bunch of those, so you can use your discretion, but most furniture and furnishings get very little value, very little, value at all. Now, on shares, if you have any mutual funds, annuities, stocks, you need to list every share individually. You cannot say Charles Schwab investment account worth this amount of money. That does not work. You must list each share, and you do not give value. On this example, it only says the shares in Safeguard Investment Mutual Fund. Probate referees won't accept that either. They like to see that little code that the mutual funds, or the code for the stock, let's say Apple APL, I don't even know if that's the right one, but you know what I mean, that it gives little codes on each stock. I give the code for them.
8-digit.
So I give that information for them on the inventory and appraisal because it's easier for them to value. Or a lot of times when I send off the inventory and appraisal and they want more information, that's one thing they'll come back and say, what are the codes on those? Savings bonds, I don't see a lot of these. A diamond wedding ring, I'm just going to go through why that is important. This is viewed by all of the beneficiaries and potential heirs of a decedent or a conservatee or a child. A child usually wouldn't have diamond rings, but it's really important to put this because a lot of things change. Like, for instance, if I only found a 2-carat, but one of the sons or daughters comes back and says, I know dad bought her a 5-carat, where's that one? One alerts me, I need to look further, but 2, also tells me, well, it only, look, 2, I have a problem with, I couldn't tell you, I know a 5-carat would be really big. Would a 2, I don't know what the difference between a 2 and a 1 really, but list all the information you can, especially if you believe it has value. And again, at the end, you will not, when you're turning this over to a probate referee, you will not put value here, but when you do get it back, it will have value, and the probate referee will also put that value right here on the second line and give a total. And again, these are the numbers that I will use when I move forward to the accounting. And I will start with, do a quick switch to you and go here. So again, the number you saw, and I don't want to keep switching back and forth, but the number you saw in the cash assets attachment 1 goes here. And the non-cash assets attachment 2 goes here. And then these two totals, this number right here. So again, the first thing I'm doing when I'm doing a review or doing an accounting is to make sure this number right here is the same number as, and I'm going to slide up, sorry, as I see right here. Remember, you saw this date, 3/8. I'm going to switch again to the accounting portion, and you will see right here, I'm starting the accounting on that same date. So again, if you can't, for the first thing you should look at, if you can't reconcile, is go back and make sure those 4 items, right? So your cash, your non-cash, your total, and the state, once you verified those, you go, okay, I can move on. At least I know the first day I started, I was good. So now I have problems somewhat here in my receipts, gains, or something else. So that's the first thing to check. Is there any questions on that portion? Because Rex will start the accounting, which is next. I did a really fast fly through because this has already been done for all of you. But is there any questions on attachment 1 or attachment 2 or the cover page? You all are good? Right on. Okay, well, I'll let Rex start then, and he will start with, again, he's gonna go through the accounting. I will come back after he's done, and I will go through the petition portion. All you.
All right.
I've never done it that quick.
Yeah, speedy, speedy. I'm back. So let me get my materials here. Okay. So what I want to do first before I get down into the nitty gritty is tell you about the resource material we have provided you. There's a link on your invite that goes to our Google Drive that has these files in it. There's 4 files. And also it was attached, or hopefully attached, to the email for your invitation for this meeting. There's 4 of them. I've got them all labeled 1, 2, 3, and 4. And what we're going through right now is handout 1. But I wanted to point out the other handouts. If you have them, you could look at them. I'm going to bring them up on the screen. Handout 2 is an Excel version of a court accounting. What we're going to be going through today is the judicial council forms put out by the state courts, and what is necessary, the requirements for the data, the details that the form wants. But I also wanted to point out there are other ways of doing court accounting that are frequently done, and Excel is one of those methods. We have a spreadsheet that we make available as kind of a rudimentary accounting. There's other software that you can get on doing court accounting, but on handout 1, this first page is a summary of account. Now, we're going to be talking extensively about a form called GC 400 summary page, which is required. And this is how it looks frequently if it's done on Excel. And what I like about this is the format's different. It doesn't use the same schedule numbers as the judicial council forms. But let me just show you an overview, because you might end up using this kind of format in the future. This is your beginning property. This is your inventory and appraisal. We've already talked about that. Now we have the receipts during the period in 2 different formats. The first format is chronological. As time went on, every deposit that was made is shown. So one part of the receipts. Now I'm going to get through this when I can find the end of it. Okay, then another format that's included in the same report or for receipts is reports showing receipts by vendor. So we can see how much was paid in by Bank of America, Bank of the West. And so it's the same data in a different format, which makes it easy for the reader to compare like bank statements, stock statements, and things. So we have a chronological, then we have a by vendor. And then after the receipts, we have a similar, well, this happens to be gain on sales. Have, selling Irish shares and things. Those are receipts also shown on another page. Now, then the other half of the equation is the disbursements. And the same thing we're talking about on the disbursements. One method is to show them all in chronological order. And then show the same data again in a different format, disbursements by account, by category. So accountant, attorney fees, bank fees, court costs, funeral expense. And it seems redundant, but it really isn't. You can look at things from two different angles pretty well. So, and we have the distributions in the end, in the back of the report. And then the property on hand at the end of the account period. So I find this useful. A lot of professional fiduciaries do them this way. It's not required. We are going to cover judicial counsel, but this format is acceptable to the courts with one exception. Let me get to that exception. You can include this summary in Excel format, but the court will likely not take it unless you have another form that we're going to be talking about extensively, is the GC 400 sum, which is the judicial counsel form that is required for all court accounting. They just like this format. So what we'll do is we'll put that on top. They want to see it. Okay, we'll rewrite it and put it on there. The next handout, I call handout 3 in your materials, is a compilation of what I think are useful and helpful information items. That we're not going to cover in at all, but they're there for your reference, basically. So we have links to all kinds of court-related forms. Then we have court information on how to prepare accounting. This is for reading material. How do I pair the schedules? And this we got from one of the courts. Pleading paper, we'll usually use Microsoft Word. We'll come up with that. And this is really helpful at times, these summary sheets, because if you have a transaction where you get money in or sold something and you need to make a determination, is this income or is this principal? It means a big difference to a residual beneficiary. And there's a lot of times disputes when you have one beneficiary being a residual and then one being an income beneficiary, because their interests or their interest in the funds are opposite. So here we've included whether you put it in principal or income on these pages. And in addition, we've given you the probate code sections where you can look that up for further information. And this is another example of a formatting. It happens to be an Excel spreadsheet model that we make available for $50 a copy. It's not the most extensive in the world, but it shows transactions and how to put things together on Excel. And that's the order form we use. And the next item that I included for you is kind of trick in that these are checklists that we got from probate examiners. When they get an accounting in, they have to go through and see, does it have this item? Does it have that item? If not, they kick it back. And our local probate examiners in Contra Costa County made these available to us for this class. So it's basically error proofing. See, do you have this item? Do you have that item? So you might want to run your accounting through that before you go to turn it in to the court. The last item we have in our 4 parts of materials is that a course evaluation. Request that you send a copy to us and to the law library at Contra Costa County, and the librarian lets the judges read and see how we did in terms of opinions. Okay, so where's my looking for my thumbnails, disappeared. There they are. Okay, so this particular page in the materials is page 21, and you might want to mark it if you have a big yellow sticky note or something. We're going to be coming back and forth to this page many times because it's the pivot. It's kind of like a bicycle tire, and this is the axle in the middle. And we need to keep coming back to the center on, it's called the GC 400 sum. And we'll go through the details. So in the headings, what kind of case is it? What's the case number? Which accounting? Is it your first or your final? The date after your last accounting to the end of the accounting period. And some of the other formatting items on this judicial counsel form. On the bottom left, it says adopted judicial counsel. It has 2 names. I just used GC 400 sum. But it's also a 405 sum. And it says here, adopted for mandatory use. So that's the courts requiring this, and that's why the probate examiners want to see this form on top of any accounting. No matter if it's probate, guardianship, conservatorships, or if you're filing in court with a trust accounting. Okay, so this is our page numbers as we go through this material are on the lower left. They've got 4 zeros and a number, and I will refer to them as we go through in case you get lost. Another thing that I point out to users of the forms is on the lower right is the probate code sections that describe or require why this form was even created. I call it a breadcrumb trail. So if I want to know more about this, I can go to probate code section 160 through 64, 2620, or the California rules of court. I look them up. Tamara tells me, don't worry about it. Most people are not going to be doing that, but it is available to you. Okay, so starting out on the form, there's not that many lines to it. Property on hand at the beginning of the period. Tamara had gone through the inventory and appraisal. These are the same numbers that come directly from your inventory and appraisal, both cash and then the ones from the probate referee that were appraised. And then a total. So this is, as a fiduciary, this is what you're responsible for. All the money you start out with, plus all the money you bring in or that comes in. Another term that comes up, and it's used frequently, is the term carry value on line 1B. Carry value, if you're used to tax like I am or accounting, we have a thing called basis. What did you pay for that rental property? What did you pay for that stock? That's basis. In court accounting, everything's different. It's carry value, has nothing to do with tax basis. And it is the value of the asset, fair market value of the asset, when you took over or when you started being a fiduciary. And it never changes unless you add more assets to it. And the way the courts look at it is the total on line 1C, that's what you're responsible. That's your burden that you have to report to the court on everything that happens. It starts out, that's where your bond is calculated. So, and the other point I make in the inventory and appraisal section that Tamara did, and I'll show you other places, every asset that you have on your inventory and appraisal, I suggest you give it a line number and never change that line number in the future, no matter what. What I mean by that, if you have 10 assets, each of them has a line number when you start. And if you were selling an item, number 7, you sold it, never use that number 7 again. The reason for that is the probate examiners and judges like to trace the assets, and so they tie in from the beginning inventory and appraisal and the ending inventory and appraisal. And I want to find asset numbers 8. And if you keep swapping them, different numbers, it makes it difficult to find consistency throughout multiple years or even through 1 year. So you'll hear carry value quite a bit. And when I'm talking about carry value, like say securities is one that changes all the time. It's for the number of shares. So really the carry value on beginning securities is the number of shares times the market value of those shares on that date. And then when you add new shares of the same company you invested in, then the carry value increases at what the cost was that you bought it for. Hope that makes sense. Okay, so this form is divided in 2 parts: money coming in, money going out. So charges and credits. Now, from an accounting standpoint, that makes absolutely no sense. Because normally you think of the word charges, oh yeah, I got a credit card, those are all my charges. Well, no. You can put charged responsibility of to clarify it. And then credits means money going out, not what you normally think. I got a credit on my Amazon charge, so they don't charge me. They reversed it. It has nothing to do with common usage of those words. So credits is money going out, charges are money transactions coming in. Since this is a required form, and when you're using subschedules, you might want to stick to the schedule letters that they've come up with. And all of these schedules we will be covering are on the Judicial Council forms. And they've given you some letters to start out with types of transactions. So receipts during accounting period, Schedule A. We might have 4 or 5 different subschedules of Schedule A. And then they combine in to get Schedule A group of transactions that are reported here. I'll explain more about that later. If you're going to be adding schedules, you normally will be adding another descriptor. I suggest you not use alphabet on your schedule numbers because it gets confusing. I first saw this, I go, okay, my next letter is going to be letter E as an echo. Oh, there's already an E down here. So it throws it off. So when you're adding schedules, I put schedule 1, schedule 2, and use the letters that are indicated. There's no problem mixing numeric and alpha schedule identifiers. So you can look at these transactions kind of like on a website where you have a group of links. So Schedule A, if you were to click on it, would bring up all the different subparts of Schedule A. Because these are summaries during this whole accounting period from March 8th to the following year, March 7th. Then at the end of the account period, we need to find out what's left over after your transactions. We have the cash items, and then what is left in the non-cash. And then you add up your money at the end, and line 7 is supposed to equal line 14. And if it doesn't, you're not done yet. Even if it's off a few pennies, you might as well not even file your report with the court, because unless it matches, it's going to be rejected. And unfortunately, with income tax, we got rid of pennies a long time ago, round to the nearest buck. And that's good enough for income tax. But for court accounting, it's all the way down to the penny. They're so anal retentive that you're stuck with the pennies on everything. You'll also know at the end of the accounting period, the word carry value comes in again. And what the court wants is putting a 0 on empty lines. Because if you leave a line blank, is there nothing there? Did you forget to put it in? There's no assertion. When you put 0 on empty lines, you've made a statement. It is a value of 0. I didn't forget anything. Okay. Let's move on to the subschedules. Okay, this is at the beginning of an accounting period. Each year, we have what I call equivalent to the inventory and appraisal items. So that's what this page shows. And just list the cash items and total it out. And then the non-cash items, list those. And using the line numbers that I mentioned earlier for each individual asset. And on your first account, carry value and estimated market value are the same. That was the whole purpose of the inventory and appraisal. So your first account, you will not have this second column, but in future years, you will. So if you have stocks that have a carry value of 10,000, and at the end of the accounting period, gee, those same stocks went up to 12,000, then you put the market value. And same thing with real property. And don't get carried away. You do not need to get an appraisal every year. Just use Zillow or Truilio or some of the other websites to get an approximation of what the market value is of that real property. I've seen cases where small estates have been required to do accounting, and there's a code section that small estates can get out of accounting. It's probate code section 2628. I saw another situation where a real distraught spouse came in, and she was required to do an accounting because her husband became incapacitated in a conservatorship, and the attorney was telling her she needed to do an accounting because of virtue of the conservatorship. And I told her I disagreed, because I determined that all their assets were acquired during marriage, which means community property. And a competent spouse with an incapacitated spouse does not have to do a court accounting, because they're half owner of everything and they have a right to manage the property. And we just got the competent spouse out of all of that paperwork. So keep that in mind. The reference on that's probate code section 3051, 3054, 3055, and 3088. So we got out of some work on that one. So let's go on to the next form. This is a summary form. I call it Rex's favorite form, in that it summarizes all the sheets that follow, and it says not to turn it in with your accounting, but I've never seen anybody shot for doing that. To me, it's a summary form. Since we have a lot of different schedules, you'll see those letters again. A, these are all receipts. A, items, income coming in. And C, these are all disbursements. So these are all schedules under the GC 400's line C. And these are all different schedules, what they call line A. I don't agree with how the court put together their math and logic, but they never asked me about it. Otherwise, I would have told them. So it's easier for me to try to trace things if they're all broken out between interest and rents and other receipts, to go to a summary form before I bring it forward to the GC 400. The next form, we're going to cover a lot of, we're under the section called Schedule A, receipts of dividends. And I want to point out on the bottom of the form, whoa, got carried away on that one. See if I can go back. That is for optional use. Approved for optional use. So that's the reason why those spreadsheet reports that I showed you can be used. You can use this if you want. Some software programs have it. We use one called CEB Essential Forms to fill out judicial counsel forms, court papers of all types. There's a couple other vendors that do the same thing. But this schedule is not required in this format. So that's something to keep in mind. So as we go through on this particular one, dividends, you would take each stockbroker report and list the dividends for each of the transactions. You cannot summarize, you cannot put the total for the period. It's each transaction. And if you have an accounting with a large portfolio, there's a dividend reinvestment program that's common. And somebody trying to do court accounting, it will drive you absolutely insane. Because when you have a big portfolio and all your dividends are reinvested into more securities, each dividend has two transactions. Each dividend is a dividend. You get to post it on the dividend income schedule here. And, oh, you got more shares. Oh, now you got to report it on the inventory and appraisal. As a purchase of 0.003 stock shares, it'll absolutely drive you crazy. Because every transaction is doubled and they're insignificant and they're a pain in the ass in the beginning, and now you got to do it two different ways. So if you have a portfolio like that, tell your brokers, don't reinvest any dividends. Take all the dividends and plunk it in a cash account. And maybe once a year, I might want to go and reinvest it in something. But in the interim, once you have a dividend that stays in cash, your accounting's done. We're only going to cover a few of these judicial council court accounting forms, but there are a total of 48 forms and schedules. That's a whole lot. We're only going to cover the most common. So we separate out the dividends, list each item, and then on, oh, I didn't realize it was changing the size of the page. So at the bottom of this page for the dividends, we're going to, the way the format works is we're on schedule, it says page A, 1 of 6. So there's 6 different schedules here, and each of these are subtotals. They're not accumulated. If you accumulate them, your numbers will be way off. And you just wait until you get 6 of 6 in this example, and then you bring your totals forward. Okay, rents. In the rents, you list the rent received. Wait a minute. Yeah, I got the wrong page number. Let me catch up with myself. Easier said than done. Receipts. Okay, so interest, we include those. Same thing, just pull them off the statements. Then receipts from pensions, annuities. For some reason, they don't want Social Security on this form, and just list it from each pension. Let's see if I can do this better. Then rents. On the rents aspect, they're only looking for the income. The expenses we're going to have to put somewhere else. We had one accounting we turned in that had 4 or 5 rental properties, and we did the most beautiful spreadsheet with income and expenses by categories. And it told you exactly what happened, and it was summarized. And they kicked it out so quick. They said, oh, You can't turn in landscape paper. I think it's gonna hurt their neck turning to read the landscape. I don't know. But normal things like you would use on a Schedule E on a tax return, you cannot do. Everything's portrait. No fancy fonts. And the expenses will be shown other places. I put all the rental income for each rental on the schedule in sequence. So this implies rents from a rental property. And they say, well, it used to be a rental property and then we turned it into an Airbnb because we get more rental income. Well, it doesn't go here anymore. An Airbnb business is in fact a business. So when they say rents, that's from a passive rental. Airbnb goes on a business schedule. And anything else like hotels, motels, bed and breakfast, those are not considered rentals anymore. In the description, I usually write out what it is: rental income, View Place, Newport Beach, single family residence, or 100-unit apartment building. Okay, the next one, receipts from Social Security. Our local probate examiners by the way, that I use the term, but what they are is they're the eyes and ears of the judges. When you file your papers, the probate examiners go through your filings with a fine-tooth comb, and they make suggestions. If you're electronically filing your documents, they might reject certain documents. But the probate examiners create review notes. They also call it a tentative ruling. And might be defects or a form you left off or something you left out. And what you want to do before every court hearing is at least 2 to 3 weeks before your hearing, after you file documents, whether it's an accounting or petitions, go to the court website and look for the tentative rulings for your case. And they do the cases all by what they call line number. And that's the line number is the calendar for the judge for that particular day. You might be line 27, and that means you're 27th in line to be heard by the judge on that date. But look at your examiner notes, because they might say that you didn't dot an I or cross a T. And if you don't look at that and fix it before your hearing, you're going to get an order from the judge, most likely, that said, we're not approving your documents because you didn't dot an I and cross a T. So you want to take care of absolutely every review note properly and have it done. So when you get to court, the judge can say that it looks complete and they can approve your filing. Okay, so the probate examiners are basically the eyes and ears of the judges. And because probate departments are so form driven, it's not like litigation where everything is written out in pleading in textual format. Okay, so we had every probate examiner in our court is required to take our class. And we had a probate examiner in our class, and she looked at this and she goes, that's not acceptable. And I'm on, if I could find a page number, 27. Because it shows Social Security payments, multiple checks on one line. Can't do it. Every transaction's got to be on its own line. no summaries, no totals. And the other thing that I suggest not doing is what I call from accounting the term netting, Netting. So if let's say you're have one expense that goes through and you're totaling it out, let's just say rental income, and you listed all the rental income that came in, and then there was an adjustment where you had to refund something. You show that refund as a disbursement. You do not subtract it from the rental income. Because when you're netting, in other words, you've got one account transaction that is handled a certain way and then a reversal. Don't net it. Take the reversal and put it over where it's supposed to be. Because there's been a lot of frauds where people are using netting and they make sure it comes out to zero at the end of the year. And you just can't do that. Keep each transaction separate and do not net numbers. Okay. Okay, so now we're on receipts. Wait a minute. There's receipts, okay. Other receipts, this is miscellaneous. Anything else that didn't fit in another category, throw it here. So miscellaneous tax refunds, different kinds of adjustments, assuming it's, in this case, receipts, funds coming in. And at the bottom of this schedule, remember I was telling you don't accumulate. We're on in pages A6 of 6. Now we need to take all the A schedules and bring them forward to the GC 400 sum. See, I'm on. So now we'll bring all of the Schedule A items into the summary sheet. I'm trying to get my schedules working here. Okay, so my index is not working like I intended it to do. Let me hold on a second. Okay, so we were on Schedule A, now we're on B, Schedule B, gains on sales. We're on page 29. On gains on sales, this is, in this example, selling of a house. So we had a carry value. And the property was sold. So we'll take the carry value compared to the gross sales price, not the net, and then we have a gain. And that's the way they want it reported. But in my view, this is not really a gain. but that's the way they require it. So you have carry value less sales price gross. And then like if you're doing a sales escrow, you've got all these escrow costs. It can be significant. Well, you don't show them here because we're on the gain schedule. The disbursements from an escrow go on the disbursement schedule. So it's illogical to me doing tax because we put everything together, but not in court accounting. Yeah. My tab system is not working. Okay, we sold the house. Now let's go move on to the next form. We're on disbursements. In this case, the Conservators lodging. They're in a skilled nursing facility, usually at 6,000 to 8,000 per month. List those, each individual item. This general and administrative is kind of like just the miscellaneous section. So if you didn't have another category for the disbursement, you would list it here. You know, we got into disbursements and I need to go back. And tie things together. We're on Schedule C, but I need to explain better on the charges items. So we had gone through Schedule A, went through B, if there's other charges, and we're still on the income coming in. This line 6 on GC 400 is if you have another trade or business on page 21, the GC 400. So if you have a trade or business, fortunately for you, you don't have to do the accounting for that trade or business. The accountant for that company will give you an income statement and you just take the number off the bottom of the page that says net income. That's all you have to do. So now we're through the charges or income section, and we'll move on to the disbursements. And we left off on general administrative. Now this one is a separate living expenses for the ward. Conservatee, list all of those. And if it's questionable whether it's for the benefit of the ward or not, explain it to the court. So let's say that you bought 50 sets of bed sheets, and the court's gonna go, what are you doing? You stocking your own house here? And you put in the margin that the Conservators incontinent. So it explains how does it benefit, or if there's a medical reason, you put in a hot tub. Was that for your benefit? No. And tell them why.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
When you're saying to explain, are we explaining the reason underneath each individual, like how it says payee and purpose of payment? So would we put the description underneath that line item?
Yes, it
Okay.
is just it's just like line item, and you're continuing on. You just, you know, you had word wrap and it kept going.
Okay,
Yeah. And
thank you.
don't get carried away with your descriptions.
Mhm.
Only bring them in if it looks like it's questionable. Did it benefit the conservator or the ward? Or how did it? It's kind of weird. How did it benefit the ward? So
Okay.
that's the only time, but don't say, you know, Verizon, yeah, this was for, you know, and this, keep it simple. Only
Okay.
if it's, somebody might challenge it.
Okay.
Another form that I want to point out, for your notes is, and it's not, we don't have a slide for it, is Schedule F. It's called change of form of assets. And a lot of probate examiners look for this. So change of form of assets, Schedule F. Let's say you had a B of A account, 100,000, and you closed it out. And now you have a Charles Schwab account for 100,000. I would put it on the change of form of asset. Other times for change of form of asset is, let's say you got stock dividends. You own 5,000 shares of Standard Oil, and they just did a 2-for-1 stock split. So you got more shares. Well, it just changed form.
That might also be appropriate for money going into a CD or a CD maturing, right?
Yes. It looks like it was a sale, but it wasn't really a sale. You just had a time lock and the time lock is over. And I would show it, change in form, and I would, show it, the line item it came out of and the line item it came into. And just keep in mind how that impacts your inventory and appraisal each time, beginning and ending.
And if we close one bank account, if we move money from one bank to another, same thing, right?
Yes, that's when I would put it on change of form. And it is also going to show on your inventory and appraisal that whatever, you'd have an asset number, and now you have a new asset number. And I would probably cross-reference, you've got asset number 4, Bank of America, and then you close it and it's gone, and I would cross-reference asset number 27 for the reinvestment so they can find it on the inventory and appraisal items. Okay. So we were on disbursements and separate category if you want to show disbursements for medical. And now we're showing the we sold some real property now on page 34. And now we have the expenses for the escrow. That house we sold. So it goes title fee, broker's commission, and loan payoff. It's kind of funny when you're dealing with sales escrow and court accounting, there's one number you never use on an escrow report. That's how much money came from the stock, from the building sale. It sounds ironic, but you don't use the net number. You have to show the gross sales and all of the costs, but you don't use the ending cash that came in that way. Okay, so this is a particular, just another kind of.
Wouldn't
Go ahead.
that ending amount go up on one of the statements somewhere though as like a wire into the bank account? Wouldn't it show up somewhere else, wouldn't it?
I'm trying to think that through. I don't have an answer for a wire coming in. What we're talking about here is we're starting from a closing statement.
Right.
So we had the sale, which is the total, and I don't think that we would be reporting the wire separately because it's part of the sales escrow.
Okay.
You would have to, obviously, if a bank balance went up, you would have to show that. I don't have a good answer for that because what I'm seeing is we're working from an escrow and now we got the cash part. Yeah, well, the cash did come in and it's got to show at the end. But no, hold on, a wire coming in.
I can probably look at our old, at prior accountings that we've seen. We can just look at a prior accounting and see how it was done.
Yeah, I'm at a loss on that one, but it brings up another point. Additional information. This book is written by an attorney in our town, Margaret Hand, and it's fiduciary accounting. See if I can get it. Fiduciary Accounting Handbook. And continuing education of the bar sells it. It's real boring reading. And don't think that you're ever going to learn to do court accounting with this handbook. But when you get a question like we just got, how do we report it? This is your reference book. And it is the only reference book that I'm aware of for California law on fiduciary accounting. It's rather pricey. It's about $290 or something for the one book. That's why I don't buy a new one every year. This one's exciting enough. But it has examples. I mean, it covers in great detail. Margaret had gone through item after item on all these different issues and covered a lot. It's a good resource. Okay, so now we're still going through disbursements and rental expenses for the rental property, listing those, and we're on page C 7 of 8. So we're getting near the C items total. And then disbursement other expenses. There again, disbursements, we're talking about like a miscellaneous that didn't fit in another category. And now, since we have C 8 of 8, now we have to go back to the GC 400 sum and indicate on the line C what the total disbursement for all the C schedules are. Now we're on losses on sale for Schedule D. And we just compare carry value to the sales price. And in this case, we come up with a loss. That line item for the old junker Oldsmobile in the asset inventory and appraisal is not going to have any asset anymore, but don't use that asset number again.
I noticed that there was loss, but loss was not, didn't have a minus sign or have parens around it. Because it's a loss, you wouldn't put parentheses around that number. Does it matter?
It does matter. Your column says it's a loss, so that supersedes your normal accounting brackets or minus. So if you have a negative loss, that means it's an income.
Right. I just want to make sure.
Yeah. So then we're done with the disbursements before, and I'm going to go back to the GC 400 sum, but we're at the end of the accounting period. So we have to list the assets again, reconcile balances on that date, and show what non-cash assets we have at the end of the accounting period, showing your asset numbers on the left that are not showing in this example. And let me go back. I'm going back to the GC 400 sum. on line 21. So what we've done so far is we went through the Schedule A assets income, the gains on sales, disbursements, the Schedule C items, the losses on sales, Schedule D, no brackets, no minus, and then the value of the assets at the end of the accounting period. And then total it out for line 7 and line 14. What I do on the accounting, since I'm old school on the accounting, I use an adding machine tape. You can use a computer, and don't add up any numbers without checking your numbers. And the reason is, it is so hard to find errors when you're doing all these kinds of transactions. It takes a lot of time to find errors to make things balance. There are common problems with court accountings. The assets don't match the inventory and appraisal. The GC 400 doesn't balance. The expenses are not clearly labeled. Other kinds of problems, reporting assets that the fiduciary has no responsibility for, including out-of-state real estate. That doesn't make sense to me, but you don't report on out-of-state real estate on your accounting. Another problem is reporting income from an unidentified asset. Fiduciaries writing a checks to themselves. That's a big, exciting no-no, because you have to get the court approval before you can pay yourself. Otherwise, it's contrary to law. And let me get some of the other errors. Yeah, the one of the probate examiners didn't want any colored papers turned in between statements. For some reason, that was one of their pet peeves. Frequently, there's no staples. Now we're doing a lot of electronic filing. Oh yeah, and you can go to the probate examiners and have them look at your accounting and ask them if they could give you a format opinion, not an opinion on whether your accounting is right or not. And at least in our local court, the probate examiners will give you, is it in the right format? If it's way off, but you got to assure them that they're not commenting on the numbers or the content, because they only do that when you file them in the court. So another thing is, when you turn in, you have to turn in your statements to the court. So in other words, the bank statements, what I was always taught is you have to turn in all of the bank statements from the last accounting to the current accounting. And our probate examiner here just recently told me that I only had to turn in the last bank statement of the accounting period. And that surprised me, but that's what they said. And I don't know if that's just our county or if it's, we've always turned in all the bank statements.
And I was wondering, up there where you are you finding that they're becoming more amiable to electronic and not requiring the originals. They were several years ago before COVID, they wanted originals. But
Yes.
now I think they're
Yes.
more amiable to the
Yes.
electronic, right?
That is correct.
Okay.
And that's what I was just looking for you. For attorneys now, we have to file everything electronically, so we don't have a choice. But what they're saying to overcome that old rule is you have to have a cover sheet
With a statement on it. Yeah.
with a statement. And it took me the longest time to figure out what they were talking about on a cover sheet. It isn't what you normally would think a cover sheet is.
I think it was some attestation saying I attest that that this is from the bank's website, blah, 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 something like
Well,
that.
what you want to have is some wording that this is a true and correct, unchanged statement from the bank under penalty of perjury. I didn't mess it up, think around with it, it's original. But the
Yeah.
cover sheet, I was surprised at, and I came up with this as the cover sheet. You know, on the top of litigation, you have what I call a caption. You're all used to seeing those. And that's what I determined they wanted as a cover sheet. So it says who's it's coming from, what court it's going to, what case, and then you put in, like when you were doing litigation and motions and stuff, you put in that it's a declaration from fiduciary on original bank statements, so that they know what it's coming from. And then I also put on the hearing date, the court department, and then put my under penalty of perjury statement underneath that. And this cover sheet gets filed with the bank statement. And I just did one electronically and it went through fine. So yes, on the electronic filings, but you need to check with your local court whether they want every bank statement, which is my thought.
That's
Or
interesting.
they'll just take the last one like my court said that we could. Now, I'm going to give it back to Tamara in a second here, but I wanted to show you this fancy, impressive completion certificate that you might want to have. And if you do want one of these, you're going to have to email us and ask for it. But it's really impressive, and you can show your friends in the neighborhood that you took this class, and they will be duly impressed. And with that, I will turn it back to Tamara to give you more info. Stay tuned.
Pepper tea.
Well,
Hi, guys. Did you have fun?
yeah,
Right?
fun.
Okay, now it's my turn. My turn. Okay, so what I'm going to be going through, sorry if I don't know what screen you can see, so I can't tell if you're seeing all my moving. But I'm going to go through, now you've got the, let me speak properly. Now that you have your accounting done, how do you submit it to the court, or what do you do with it, right? So this is going to go into the petition phase, and what you're going to be reporting in the petition phase, and or what are you asking the court to do with the accounting that you just completed now, right? So you will want to do this on pleading paper. This is only my example. This would say your name. This would say your name pro per. This is the county that, or the county is filed in. So our example's orange, could be LA.
Tamara?
Yes,
All I can see right now is your smiling face.
that's not good.
Yes, it is.
Okay.
Is everybody else, is that true for everybody else too?
I can see a form. So
Can you see the petition right here?
yes, I can see the petition with your mouse going back and forth.
I think what I did was when he was putting that document up to the screen, I might have changed my view. So don't mind me then.
Okay, well, I want you to see the document, not me. What if I
Yeah.
pick my nose or whatever? I don't want you to see that. No, I'm kidding. Okay, so I'm gonna, how about you, Jermaine?
I switched it. I'm still have a little picture of you, but that's okay. I can see
Okay.
that. I see a court document here. Jeannie Lowry, known as Jeannie Gray.
Yes, you're right
Yeah.
there. Okay, you
I,
can see it.
yeah,
Okay,
I
perfect.
see the document and then I have you in the little window talking, so I can see the whole document.
Great, okay. So
There we go.
let's go back. Again, this is more for the pro per, but so you will want to put your name information up here yourself. Don't use the attorney information. This is the court you're submitting to. In our sample, this is the conservatorship, and I typically don't put up here person and estate. I'll put it down in here if there is one, because remember, conservatorship of the person is just of the person, right? Does not handle
Yeah.
any money, doesn't handle anything. Conservatorship of the estate handles actual money, and that's why you have to do an accounting. So if you're only appointed conservator of the person, you would never have to do this accounting or petition. This is our conservatee. And at this point, you put the case number. I use a few spaces to separate the case number from the actual title, or what the court will call a caption. And anytime you're given like examiner notes or anything like that, and they say something about your pleading information doesn't match your caption, this is the caption they're talking about, not this, not this. They're talking about this actual, which is what they call a caption. Okay. So it could be your first account, the second account, fourth account, 10th account, it doesn't matter, but you'll state what account it is that you're submitting. So it's in this sample, it's your first account. It's the report of the conservator and the petition for its settlement. In this case, or in this example that Rex taught the accounting, there was a sale of, I believe, an automobile. So they call it a depreciating property. I myself don't typically put that in, because most of the time when there's no sale of asset, but I'll just describe it down below. But in this case, they wanted approval. Allowance of fees to the conservator. That's only if the conservator is actually requesting fees. And then attorney compensation. In most cases, or in all cases for pro pers, that we don't have an attorney, so there would be no request for attorney compensation. But in the cases with the fiduciary, they likely have an attorney, so that would be in there. And so that's your caption.
So I would just put like, obviously the our case number, first accounting, current and report of conservator.
Yeah, right. This is your report.
And then, right, yeah, and then just, that's all I would put, right?
No. And petition for its settlement. You want, so again, honey, understand what you're doing is you're limiting liability. When you have the court approve your accounting, say there's daughters, sons, cousins, or other people who are interested or possibly a beneficiary of this conservatee because he's your uncle. So say your uncle has children and they just could not, for whatever reason, take on a conservatorship. you want to make sure that you limit your liability and you have the court approve your accounting. Because once the court approves your accounting, no one can come back later and contest it and say, oh, she sold the vehicle and that was supposed to come to me and she sold it to her friend for cheap. And now I want her to pay me what the value of the vehicle was. If they did something like that, the court would go back and go, you had your opportunity. I approved the accounting already. It's gone. You're down, like you lost your ability to come back and contest it. So when you're asking the court for the settlement or which is really an approval of this accounting, you're doing so for the specific purpose that you're limiting your liability for anybody to come back later and contest or argue or not be happy with something you did. Does
Okay.
that make sense?
Yeah,
No, you have a question, so.
well, I do have a question. So, and it's so hard. So my uncle has been on the spectrum his entire life. He's
Okay.
55. He was diagnosed at 7. He has no children, no spouse.
Okay,
The house that is his estate is 50. He owns 50%. My mother owns the other 50%. But I financially pay for everything because being California, he can't pay for anything. So that's why when I was asking about like the documents to list, like the items, I only deposit his check into the accounting. And then like when you said to list like each individual thing, sorry. I don't know. I'm just
honey, tell
I
me
don't know.
what your question is. Let me help you.
Well, so basically, like for me filing this, like I know like I could ask like to be compensated for, I mean, things
Time,
I pay
yes.
the second mortgage and all that, my time to drive downtown, the expenses. But I want to get the house paid off because I ultimately, my mom owns the other 50%. There's 4 kids,
Sure.
but I live here. I want the house at the
Okay,
end, but I know I'm probably going to lose it because of Jeff being on Medi-Cal his whole life. So is it, I guess,
well, you wouldn't lose it, hun. No, I wouldn't say that. He only owns 50%. They can
yeah,
only, Medicare chargeback at death could only, believe, but that would be more for an attorney to ask, but could only, go after half. So what would happen, would you get a loan to buy out the other portion? But, unless mom has a trust or something of that nature giving it to you, it would go
yeah,
to the 4 of you or all her kids, that you would split the half and have to figure out how to buy the uncle out of the other half.
of the house. Because I just tried to refinance it and they told me I couldn't because I'm the conservator. I couldn't be on the mortgage, even though I paid the bills.
Yeah, I understand. I totally understand. So basically on your inventory and appraisal, you did 50% interest in real property located at 1234 Baker Street, right?
I believe he did. I need to double check because he may have put the whole,
Then
but
you didn't
with the
tell him.
county, it's 50-50 on file already with Los Angeles County when I went through probate.
Honey, that doesn't matter. I'm talking inventory and appraisal, which gives you value at
Okay.
this time. You would want to make sure that they only recorded he owned 50%. But you still need to ask for this, whether you wish to ask for a reimbursement of prepaid expenses or not is absolutely completely up to you.
Okay.
I can tell you what I would do if I was in that situation. I absolutely could, even
Yeah.
though he didn't have the funds to pay me back, it still would allow me to show my, what I've paid forth so that if and when he does pass, because we all will,
Yeah.
you know, you could possibly do that, but without it recorded somewhere, you have nothing, so I still would put it in there.
Okay.
But that's up to you. I can't tell you what to do. That's your decision. So, okay, we're gonna continue down. As far as date of hearing, you would leave it blank. As soon as you file this, the court will automatically put in your date, your time. You could put your department if you know it. I don't usually use judicial officer here, because of the fact that you never know who is going to be. Yes, I understand a specific judge, but the judge may be ill that day. You might get, you know, you could get somebody else. And so I don't typically put the judicial officer here. So how you're gonna start it is the petitioner is David in this case. So it would be you. So you would put petitioner, your name. You're going to refer to yourself hereinafter as conservator. You're conservator of the estate of whomever, the conservatee. You're going to present for settlement and allowance your verified first account. So you're kind of just repeating your caption page. And here is what you need to start off with and state. Remember that all papers submitted to the court must act on their own or be able to tell the story within itself. So there's never a point where you would want to submit something to the court that says, hey, go look at your files and you can see when I got appointed conservator, or hey, go look in your files, you can see when I got my letters. No. That's not what they're for. They have more important things to do. So you would start out with, when was my appointment? You would repeat this even on your second, your third, your fourth, your every one after. You're going to say, when was the appointment, right? So petitioner was appointed on this date. Now, again, what is the date? The date to me, and from reading it and just from knowing it, is the date the letters were signed, which GC 340, I believe. I'm sorry, the order was signed, which is, I think the GC 340. For a probate, it's just the DE 140. And letters of conservatorship were issued at a later date. A lot of people interchange these, and it's important. Your actual authority to take control of assets are on the order date. The letters date, which is kind of your official title to be a conservator, can come later, because of the fact that sometimes the court orders bond and you need to go apply for a bond and pay for the bond and get the bond and then turn it into the court. And so there's a little bit of a delay. This could have been a weekend, you know, there might have been a delay in issuance of letters, but I always report both. So your first one's going to be, when was I ordered, and then when I received letters. Okay, and then at all times you've been still acting as conservator. You're going to reference the inventory and appraisal. So the inventory and appraisal was filed with the court when it showed a value of what. What they're going to do is cross-check this number to your accounting and the inventory and appraisal. You're going to state your account period. Now, whether it's your first, your fourth, your fifth, your 12th, you're going to state the account period here. Charges and credits, basically, you're just saying, look at the charges and credits. Now, when I do mine, typically, I will list the charges and credits separate out, and I will show you what I'm talking about when I say that. I typically will take this page and say, my charges, my total cash on hand is this. I had receipts this, my gains were this, my total charges are this. in credits is a separate one. And then I don't list the ones with zeros. I only list the ones with number, and my ending balance is this. And so I showed the court on my petition that I balance. So that, so they don't go back looking for it themselves. But that's me and personally how I do it. Now, doing that, I totally lost where my petition was. So it's up to you whether you do that right here under after 4. The authorized investments during the period, all cash has been invested and maintained in an interest-bearing account. If you are a conservator and do not have money in an interest-bearing account, do so right away. You can be charged back. In fact, I have seen cases where a conservator put money in a non-interest bearing account, and beneficiaries later on, a couple of years later, sued the conservator for the amount of money lost in interest that they should have gained because it was in an interest-bearing account. And the probate code states that you must have monies in an interest-bearing account. Although recently, and in fact, I think it was Stanley Mosk, a probate referee, came back, and I think their probate referees are attorneys that do just some work as a probate referee, but came back, and it was very strange. The first time I've seen it happen, and it happened earlier in the week, that the they had money, but they wanted it into a sweeping account because of an FDIC that insures only up to a certain amount of money and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, okay, now we're really getting technical with this. So just make sure you have money in an interest-bearing account. Statement of liabilities, you have to state if there is any liabilities. The liabilities typically they're referring to are taxes, judgments, anything of that nature. Now, now we're getting into optional, whether that you include them or not. Here, they have listed in the example a sale of an automobile. Of course, if you don't have an automobile sale, you would not put this in. But I have said that in prior classes, like, oh, if you didn't have this, don't put it in. And then Probers came back and said, Tim, my petition got rejected. I don't know why. Can you help me with the examiner notes? I'm glancing through it, and they decided on their own that they just didn't include this. They didn't include this. They didn't. And I'm like, no, 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 no. When I say if you don't have something, don't include it. I'm only starting about this line 7. 6 and up, absolutely you have to include. If you didn't sell a vehicle, though, don't put that in there. If you didn't sell anything, just don't put anything in there. Just skip this one and move on to the next one. If you did sell something and you want to report it, please do so. I always make sure when there's something like this that a notice of proposed action is sent out to all parties prior to whatever it is you're selling or getting rid of. That also limits your liability. So I typically will add that I issued a notice of proposed action on this date. I would allow, I think by law I use the typical and regardless of what the law is, because I think the law is a short amount of time, I use a little bit extra. So if they're out of state, 30 days, if they're in state, 15 days, I typically try to give 30 days unless it's just absolutely impossible to do that. I will give notice, and that allows anybody to tell me that's a beneficiary or heir that they don't want me selling it or anything of that nature. So I will typically add at the end of the sentence that a notice of proposed action was issued on this date, And I gave them until this other date. I did not receive any contesting or any objection to my sale. I usually add something of that nature, but so that's the sale of an automobile. This is sale of furniture that was in the beach house, that was the rental or vacation home. Again, likely wouldn't state that in there. Now we're getting down to, there was a sale of a vacation home. Again, if you don't have this in your situation, skip it. Go straight to additional bond, go from 6 down to additional bond. So again, this describes, I would never do this, the vacation home without a notice of proposed action, specifically a house. I would give 30 days notice of proposed action, that this is what I intend to do. And in a conservatorship specifically, to sell the residential property of the conservatee, you must have court approval. You can never do that. I wouldn't do it on a vacation home either. I would get pre-approval before I do that. Even if you're talking the ownership is only 50% or a small percentage, and wants to sell it to another relative that is also on title, that takes over, court approval for conservatorships. We're talking probate or probate, that's a whole different issue. As long as you have full authority, you can do it. If you're talking a guardianship, no, court approval also. Okay, additional bond. Let's go through this a tiny bit, okay? So additional bonds, and like, what's the purpose and why? The bonds are so that money does not, well, let me back up. A bond is so that if money disappears because it just flew away, because I hear that all the time. I didn't take it, I didn't touch it, I don't know where it went, I don't know what happened to it, and I'm looking going, you're talking $10,000. What do you mean? It just, I need to know, right? What will happen is the court will go back and court itself, but and they will file a claim against your bond. The bond company will replace the $10,000 to the estate. You will be immediately removed, but that's a whole nother story. And so the bond will replace the funds, and then it's up to you, which eliminates the court having to intervene or have process, but it's up to you to figure out how you're paying back the bond company. So that's what it's for. So now I'm going to use an example, and I typically use it on here, but I'm just going to tell you about the bond. So in the example, and maybe let's move to, I'm sorry, I'm going to move to the accounting page. So you have total assets of 1,342,258.59. Say the court issued, or when you first got your letters, because you didn't really know what assets you had, you were told that you only had to get a $20,000 bond, which is the minimum bond amount. Now, when it comes to the petition where we just read, and or the inventory and appraisal where you were marking that, if you have $1,342,000 worth of assets and you only have a $20,000 bond, is your bond sufficient to cover this, your conservatorship? It's a no, absolutely no, right? So what you are doing now, it's not up to you to decide whether you need more of a bond, or the court should tell you you need more of a bond, or anything of that nature. But what you will be doing when you're doing your petition, and I'm so sorry, I find it's backwards. What you're going to be doing when you're doing, sorry, next page. Your petition is you're going to be stating whether you feel or you realize your bond is sufficient enough. So in this case, Typically, it only has to cover cash. Sometimes the court will add in the real property values, but because it's real property until you actually do the sale, and again, you have to get approval to do that so the court knows. And you haven't increased your cash, then you're kind of good. Like, say for instance, your cash was 50 and your bond is 20, you're gonna state, I know my bond isn't enough at this point, and then kind of just leave it at that. And if the court reviews and goes through, examiners typically will put it on the notes to the judge that says, hey, she's got cash of 50, her bond is only 20. It's a little tickler for, like, you may want to increase the bond. So this is the bond. In this case, the person who might have been, or, you know, working with a fiduciary or somebody, they know that, hey, I sold real property. I have a whole lot more cash, although I've invested it. I now know my bond doesn't cover, and their bonds are, you know, might be higher, or they have a little bit flexibility more than the average person because they're licensed and things of that nature. But they would possibly go increase the bond themselves and just tell the court, okay, you didn't tell me I had to, but I already increased the bond. It's all covered. We're all good. But that's what this section is here. Got it? Any questions? Nope. Okay, good. So, and this will give you a little tidbit to read also, and be helpful. This is one question that you absolutely must have on your petition, and it's called the no affiliate relationship. So during the account period, the conservator did not hire an agent who was a family member. The purpose of this, it doesn't mean you cannot hire a family member. And I'll use this example in a probate case of mine recently. So there was a probate. The son was the administrator. His wife was a realtor broker. And so the house was going to be sold, and he, of course, he's going to use his wife to sell the house, right? And doesn't mean it's wrong. It's not wrong. He just, one, has to disclose it, and two, she cannot make more money off of the sale than the average person would. So if all of that stays in line, of course she can sell the property. You can't, you know, say no. Why would you give it to somebody else when, you know, that's what your wife does for a living, right? So as long as you state that here and disclose it, and I've disclosed it many times in my petitions and never saw the courts come back and flag anything about it. Now, here is where your problem lies. I'm gonna give you another example here. So say for instance, I'm a conservator, and the conservatee has temporarily, maybe for rehab or some other purposes, gone into a home, right? Or gone into a rehab center, and maybe it's going to be 3-4 months. So, and the house that he lives in is in a, like a homeowners association community, right? So they're really picky about keeping landscape and everything of that nature up to par, and, you know, certain things grass can't grow, certain whatever. Right? So there's a landscaper that the conservatee has hired, and once a week they come in. Well, the landscaper calls me up now and says, hey, I just wanted to let you know I'm going on vacation for a month, right? I'm like, oh, good, you know, have a great time, blah, blah, blah. Thank you for the notice. And now I'm scrambling because now I've got to go find somebody to fill the spot that he no longer can fill. So my son, let's just say, is home from college. And I say, hey, I need you to do me a big favor. He's reluctant because he doesn't want to mow lawns, right? He didn't want to mow them for me, so he surely isn't going to want to. But I have a little incentive. Hey, I'll pay you. Okay, now typically I would pay the gardener $100 every week when he came, right? So I tell my son, I'll give you $150 every week for you just to go mow the lawn, take care of everything for me so I don't have to worry about it. He says, okay, it's cool to me. I only got to go once a week. I'll be there, blah, blah, blah. Okay. Now, I'm gonna report it. Yes, my son went. But do you see where there's a huge problem in my regular gardener, or the regular gardener was only being paid $100 each visit. And now I'm having my son, because I need him to do me a favor, and I'm paying him $150, right? Big no, absolutely, absolutely not. Now, there is a difference between if I told my son, I'll give you $100, the same fee that I was paying the regular landscaper who's been there for years, then there is no problem with that. It's when I'm using the conservatees money to, let's say, enhance my own family situation. So I'm free, I'm not using the same regard for the conservatees money that I would if it was my own, or you know, somebody else's. So you're held to a, you know, stronger, you're handling somebody else's money. You really need to be careful with it. So please don't ever do anything like that. If you do, you have to record that you did it. Likely, and I've seen in some cases, the court has come back and the conservator had to pay back the conservatee the amount of overage money that I enhanced my son with by paying him $150 a week instead of the $100. And it did not look good for the conservator. So again, you can hire family, you just disclose it. Remember, if the family member cannot be paid any higher rate than anybody else in the business would, and or consider factors that if your landscaper actually runs a business, has a 1099 NEC, business cards and things of that nature, he should be paid more than my son who just borrowed somebody's lawnmower and went over and mowed the lawn, right? So keep those things in mind, and just be mindful of the money you're spending of the conservators. Okay, a conservatee, I'm so sorry. Compensation, again, it's up to you whether you wish to be compensated. There's no reason why you should, especially if they are not a mother or a father, that you should not ask for a compensation. It is a whole lot of work. Ask the two ladies, Danielle and Tracy, how much work. People don't realize how much work. The phone calls, oh my God, I think there's a rat in the wall, or, you know, and you're like, what? Or, you know, just how many times, how much just involvement, and you almost become a family member in some cases to the person, and how much time, and you should be compensated for your time. Again, I realize if it was a mother and father, you know, people will say, well, they took care of you until you were 18, you could at least take care of them. That's your obligation. But if it's not mom, dad, I myself would, but that's just me. Because I'm giving up a lot. I'm giving up the ability to go out and work somewhere else, or I'm giving up whatever things, you know, I could be doing for them. You have to document all of your time, should be by day, what you accomplished, or as the court would say, what benefit did the conservatee receive, whether you took them out for a haircut, whether you took them, you know, for walks, doctor's appointments, whatever, took them shopping, you, whatever it is, just write down the date, what you did, how much time was spent. In this case or example, they spent 150 hours. That's likely for a very short time period, but, or he didn't see his mom often, but, or this is all he's charging. You'll want it on a spreadsheet. And so that will list, you know, how much time. In this case, this conservator visited the facilities at least once a week to make sure she was being properly cared for and that all of her personal needs were met. He marshaled the assets, he paid the bills, he managed the estate frugally, he sold the car, he sold the vacation home. Like, he did a whole lot of stuff for only 150 hours. I mean, I probably sometimes selling a house would not be 150, but it's a lot of times sometimes. And you are never, ever, ever to receive any compensation prior to the court ordering it. So you're never allowed to pay yourself. And I say careful even with expenses, like say for instance, you had cash, you went to lunch and they didn't have any cash or any money on them, and you paid for it and you thought, well, I'll just reimburse myself when I get home or whatever. Don't do that ever. That's bad, 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 bad. You have to wait until your next accounting, then you ask for reimbursement for that. So that's the way. I never put hands on the conservatees' money. Now, that doesn't mean pay their bills and other things that it's not you, right? It's just for you. Always you need to ask the court first. Now, I will state in some cases, if you or possibly, because I can't speak for them, but for the fiduciaries, they may, after their first accounting, they now have an idea of how much work's going to be involved, what expenses are going to be involved, and things of that nature. They could ask, right, at this point, but not in this actual section, it would be a new section. They could ask for future monthly expenses or future monthly fees that would cover, so that they don't have to wait a full 2 years to get reimbursed, especially if it could rack up in time and expenses. So even if you're pro per and you know that there's going to be a lot of expenses, you could ask for an allowance. Now, let me use another example. So I had a conservator, mom was in a care facility home, and something about, I guess she could go buy, I don't know, stuff from the gift shop, or yeah, in this case, like you bought coffee or you bought extra creamer, or if you wanted a second copy, you had to buy it or whatever. So they had to give her, or they did give her, I think it was like $150 a month in cash, so that she could, and that's all she was allotted, but so that she could buy these little things per month in, like, it wasn't leaving the care home and going shopping or the grocery store, anything like that. I don't mean that, but it was a big facility. So in that case, we included in there that we would like approval for a monthly allowance of cash to the conservatee, this amount for this purpose, that will not be reconciled, will not be accounted for. It's just an allowance. Now, don't go thousands, or really keep it in line, or the court won't approve it anyway, but that is an option. Now, also, you want to make sure that you read the local court rules for your court. We're doing this class for Contra Costa County. Contra Costa County local court rules allows for typically a conservator can charge $50 an hour. I know at some point that raised to 75. And I know fiduciaries get a much higher rate because they have license, they're much more detailed in the work that they have to do, record, keep records of, and things of that nature. So that would be the fee base that you would ask for compensation. I typically like to say stay lower unless you have a real good reason to go higher. And also keep in mind, if you have an estate, let's say that you only have cash and you only have a small estate. Let me just even use maybe like 30,000 total in cash. You're really not going to ask for $10,000 in fees on that small of an estate because you're depleting like be kind of reasonable, see, and little stuff, combine things together, and again, be reasonable, but record your time and ask for what you're doing worth. Attorney compensation, again, for a pro per, you wouldn't put this in, or maybe you would. Maybe you hire an attorney at the very beginning. Well, a lot of times, an attorney is not allowed to be paid until this accounting is approved. But say, for instance, you use an attorney at the beginning, and then for some reason that attorney just doesn't work out for you. It doesn't matter what the problem, purpose, whatever, just didn't work out for you, and now you want to go pro per, but you have to pay that attorney. You can tell them, hey, you're not allowed to be paid. I have to wait till I get my accounting approved. Or if you do pay them, they have to give you a very detailed accounting of what they did. And there's a possibility, if the judge doesn't approve the services that attorney provided and you already paid for, if he doesn't approve all of it, you're going to be responsible for paying back because you paid that attorney prior to getting approval to do so. But that's in very rare cases. So be careful on paying an attorney ahead of time, ahead of your order. Unless, again, this is your second, third, fourth, and typically the attorneys themselves, they know this, and they will request a kind of like a reserve or request, put something in their trust account and keep it to use for expenses, not time, but for expenses. Okay, it's very important to include veteran benefits. You do want to notify the court if the conservatee is receiving any Department of Veteran Affairs. It's not only the conservatee, it's in a probate and in a guardianship also. You also want to state, and it's not, if they're not receiving benefits, you don't put this in. This must go in every time, and you state yes or no. It's not one of those that you can remove. I want this in every time. Also with the state hospital, every time you state whether they're a patient or not. Now we're getting down to the conservatee's address. It's very dependent whether I include this or not when I'm doing petitions. And it really depends on quite a few things. If the conservatee is living at their home, I really don't, it doesn't matter. That's not anybody, this is public record. You don't want to say, hey, somebody knows there's a conservatee living home by themselves. That leaves them open to thieves, burglar, I don't do that. That's just me personally. Most of the time to get a conservatorship, you have to fill out a million gazillion papers. They know where that conservatee lives. So you could just state conservatee still resides at her same residence or something of that nature, because of the fact that you just don't want it out there. And the stuff that Although on a lot of the conservatorship papers that was public information, there was still some confidential information, so I keep it like that. But if they're in a home and that home already has like an office and, you know, you have to walk through a front area and blah, 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 and a lot of other people live there, I maybe would. Okay, so now we're getting down to account statements. You have to remember that when you turn in the accounting, you must also turn in bank statements. They must be original bank statements. They are not allowed to be something you printed off the internet. So if it's online banking that you're doing for the conservatee, you may want to switch that and get paper copies. Otherwise, what will happen is
We talked about this earlier, and I actually asked Rex that question. And because pre-COVID, they were using that rule. During COVID, the courts seemed to loosen up, and they seem to have stayed loose and are more open to electronic statements. And Rex said that he recently was told by an examiner they didn't even have to give out 12 months, just the last month.
yeah,
So have you?
I've seen, okay, so, and realize Rex is probably talking about more up here, up north cases. I do a whole lot of down south, Orange County, Stanley Mosque, all those down south. They want all the statements. They've always had.
We're actually in Orange County, and we do LA.
Right, so,
Just
yeah.
so you know, they're loosening up even down here.
That, in which that's awesome, but I would always still use the rule. I will
Right.
tell you on second, thirds, fourth, fifth accountings, they are much looser in that they only really technically want the first statement and the last statement, because then they can see your beginning assets and your ending assets and know you balance, right? The whole intersections they don't care about. But for a first accounting, typically I have known them to want to see kind of, they want to make sure you understand what you're doing and there's no funny stuff going on, because your first accounting is typically a high percentage of whether you're going to get removed as a conservator or not, right? So it's after the first accounting, they loosen up a whole lot because they go, okay, they got it, you know, it looks good. And they can rely on a little bit. If a conservator is going to be removed from an appointment, it's going to be at the first accounting. That's hit or miss 9 times out of 10 right there. Right. So I myself state, turn in all your bank statements for your first one. Again, I'm showing examples of a first one. Second, third, fourth, fifth, I really only do beginning and ending. And again, typically for here, and it's funny because they want, for fiduciaries and someone like me, I have to e-file. So how do you know whether my statements were printed off the internet or not, right? I've been pretty loose on getting them and doing that. For ProPERS, they literally have to walk them in, and whether the file clerk would take a printed copy or not, I don't know that answer. So again, ProPERS have a little bit different because fiduciaries and me as an LDA must submit electronically, and they wouldn't know whether I had original or not. But so what I say for, and then I talk like Stanislaus, Stockton, Modesto. Oh, Lord, their judges don't play. They do not, they want everything and crazy more. They force, if you go to a bank and get the statements reprinted, because again, you cannot print off the internet, the bank has to stamp some type of bank, Wells Fargo or B of A stamp on the back, so they certify they came from the bank and not from somebody who I could have printed to a PDF and I can manipulate almost any PDF out there. So, you know, that's what I think they're just trying to make sure. Again, a lot stronger rules on the first one, a lot more relaxed on your ones following.
Do you find that when a case changes, like for example, from conservatorship to decedent estate, that if the decedent estate is going to go on for longer than a year, let's say, or just when it goes from one to the other, do you find that first decedent estate accounting, or that one right after death, kind of follows the same type rules? Or do you if they've been the conservator for 2 or 3 years, that
Yeah,
it's
they're really, it's much more relaxed after the first one,
okay?
hon. It really
Okay.
is. They're wanting, you know, it's the whole, again, they can almost tell in the first years, especially because like 9 times out of 10, when I do them for a first accounting, the people were like, I didn't know they were, okay, let me give you, I'm doing a guardianship now case and I have problems because, or I don't have problems, she does, the mom. So son inherited money from father passed away. I think a tragic accident or whatever, but inherited money. So she had to do a guardianship because inherited money, and he can't have it, right? It would have been smarter for her just to put it in a blocked account, and then when he turned 18 he could have it, but she went the other route and did a guardianship. So we did the accounting, and she takes monthly money from his account, and I'm like, oh boy, here we go with this. This is, I can't say anything to them. I just can report what I see. And she said, yes, but I'm having Social Security, I guess because he was on disability or something. I'm having the Social Security, which is for monthly living expenses, deposited into the guardian's or the guardianship account. And
Bad idea.
bad, all out bad, right? So even the examiners write back on the notes to clear, like, what makes you think that taking 40,000 a year out of this child's account, you are the mother and you are responsible for his support, right? Literally, they wrote that. And I was like, oh boy, here we go. Well, then the guardian mom gets upset and she's like, well, I didn't know I was going to have to account every dollar in, every dollar out, and blah, blah, blah. Again, this is where the courts see, okay, we're really going to see what you're doing, right? So this first year is, they know whether she's likely going to be removed. But again, she's arguing that the amount of money received from the inheritance is still there, and she's only ever spent what's come in from Social Security. And literally the judge said to her, and she's down in LA, the judge said to her, well, I'm not sure that you're allowed to spend the Social Security either. I'm gonna appoint counsel for the guardian and let him figure it out, right? So she now wants to, so she went in and said, I want this whole guardianship closed. I think the judge laughed at her and said, yeah, no.
And by the way, Social Security might spank her too, because Social Security an
Right?
account that only has Social Security in and Social Security out. They don't like the commingling of funds.
Right, exactly. And but she came to me in accounting, so we're already a year after the fact, and I can't give legal advice, so I can't even say all that. But I was explaining a tiny bit to her, and I think the counsel for the son that got appointed said, well, let's just, and she's all excited about the counsel for the son. And I laughed myself, and I'm thinking, honey, that counsel isn't for you and isn't on your side. They're on the whole opposite side, but that's a whole nother story. And then he suggested, well, maybe you should put the IRA in a blocked account And then you could possibly, if the courts let you close the guardianship, because it's just guardianship of the estate, so it's just a money, close it and figure out Social Security another way. But anyway, it was the whole, they know whether you're going to be replaced or not with this first accounting. So first accounting's different rules, a little bit more strict in what they have and data you provide. I would always provide all the statements. After the first one, just the first and the last is likely good. If they want more, they'll ask for more, and you'll have plenty of time to submit them, but it's a little bit more lax after. Okay, capital changes. Again, this has to do with if stocks, or some really big other capital changes or non-cash assets. You don't see much of those. I can tell you that during COVID time period, I had a lot more where I was explaining because the stock market crashed. Like I myself lost like $60,000, if not more, in my stocks and panic. Now they've gone back up, so I'm almost at the spot I was. But anyway, during that time period when I was reporting and my cash, my stock, my non-cash stock or mutual funds, whatever, was just plummeting, right? I'm thinking, you have to explain why. Like, my gosh, I was able to explain, which they knew, but I would put in here certain things like that COVID stock markets crashed. It wasn't me doing risky investments or anything of that nature. But typically there's nothing to say, but you should put it in there. If there's any liabilities, you must state them. So if there's a promissory note or a deed of trust, you're making mortgage payments, state where, why, how much is still left. A lot of times though, I really haven't had a need to really put this on there. This person in this sample went as far as what are the payments and what are the interest and what are the interest rates. I don't go into all of that, whether there's a balloon or not a balloon. You don't see many nowadays, or I myself don't see a lot of balloon payment mortgages. But if there are mortgage payments, they can also see in the accounting that's going to be attached to this. Oh, that's one thing that this sample doesn't do. I'm sorry, I'm going to slide up. Remember when I started talking about the charges and credits and things of that nature? I think it's one more up, sorry. Charges and credits and how I put the cover on of the counting that I did. You will also want to know, this mouse just moved so very weird. You will also want to state that you're attaching a copy of the report as an exhibit. This doesn't state that, but that's the only way. You cannot attach the accounting as a separate document. So that's the only way to be able to file that actual accounting report is to attach it as an exhibit here. And our example doesn't go through that. It's okay, we're almost done. I promise. I'm gonna go down. I think we were here, yes. Oh, further than I thought. Capital changes we went through. Liabilities we went through. A special notice. Make sure this should always be on here whether someone has requested special notice. I'm going to say this or explain what that means for the proper. What could happen is typically you'll see a creditor file a request for special notice. So you're talking FTB is one of them, will file all the time. A credit card that maybe hasn't been paid, especially if you're talking decedent's estate, you get a lot of credit card companies who will want. There's a possibility if there is some type of loan or a balloon or something like that on a mortgage, you may get the mortgage company filing a request for special notice, but not regularly. Really what that is anybody. You don't have to be related to the person. You don't have to know anything. Well, conservatorships and guardianships, they are a little tighter than I would say probates. But so if I use the example of probate, I could be anybody. I right now could go file a request for special notice on anybody's case I want. What does that mean? It just means for every document you file with the court, they have to get a copy of that document. So they kind of get to follow and see what's going on with the case. A lot of times, if you get somebody like, okay, we're talking a probate, and say for instance, Jamae, you want reimbursement, and now I'm not talking you as a conservator, but you want reimbursement because you were making mortgage payments, and so you do a creditor claim on the probate estate and want to be reimbursed. You could file a request for special notice because your creditor claim can be rejected or accepted, either or. And even if your creditor claim is rejected or accepted, when you pay the $40 fee for the special notice, you would still get copies of everything on the account. And so you could still follow. So there are times where a request for special notice is done. I'm telling you, most of the time it's on probate cases, not on conservatorship cases. Probate cases, I get them Medicare, Medi-Cal, Social Security will file them. If there's a victim's comp claim, no, they don't file. Yeah, they do. Requests for special notices, things of that nature. So you need to state on here whether a request for special notice was filed or not. Most of the time it's no.
It's no.
Right.
I have a question about the section 19 or number 19 above there.
Yes, son, up here.
I know for this house, there is a balloon payment that's on the second mortgage that's gonna be due. So I have to list that information
You should
for the
list that,
state.
yes, that information here, but you have to remember to also state he's only responsible for 50% of it.
50.
Because he
Okay.
only owns 50% ownership in, so he will only be responsible, sorry, I'm tying my shoes. He will only be responsible for 50% of the balloon payment. I
Okay.
would put it in.
Okay. All right.
Okay, so we're going down. Now we're getting down to the prayer. What do you want the court to do? Now that you've told your story, what do you want the court to do? So you as the conservator are going to say, I want this accountant report approved and settled, done. That all the acts that I have shown during my accounting period be approved. So again, selling the car, the vacation home, getting rid of the furniture, everything that happened during my accounting, I want it approved. Now, in this case, they wrote specifically the sale of the automobile. I would not have put that in there because it's kind of a given, but they wanted this out for attention. So they put it in there, and the sale of furniture, I wouldn't have put it there either. Now, upon settlement, so approval of this account, the conservator is directed to pay himself, the sum of $500. That's all he asked for. So, whatever your amount is, so your hours times your rate, it gets an amount. So you would say you want this, or you could even say, even if you didn't want to be paid right now, let's say you didn't want to be paid right now, you could put something on here that I want to be credited for $5,000 to be paid in the future. If there's if there's more funds available, or, things of that nature. And then at least it's recorded somewhere. Whether you decide to pursue it and get paid for it or not is a whole nother story. But you are still putting it in and have that opportunity to get it later. So maybe upon his passing or something of that, you could say, okay, yes, he owns 50% of this house, but now I have this amount of money that I'm to be paid. And, because, you're entitled to it, doing the work you did. Now, you can decide to do that or not. Again, they asked for payment to the attorney. You would not put that in there if there was no attorney hired. And then whatever else the court deems proper, you will date it and you will sign it. This is for the attorney. And typically attorneys first and then conservator, but this sample, no. And then there must be a verification. Really important. What is the verification? There are so many times long ago, not so much now, that I would get calls from propers and they go, the court keeps asking for a verified deck, a verified deck, a verified deck. I don't even know what that means. Well, I'll tell you what it means. I instantly was like, okay, you're signing under penalty of perjury. That's all. It's a verified declaration that you, the conservator, know what you wrote. So somebody else didn't write it and you know nothing about it. You know what you wrote. You fully understood what you wrote. What you wrote is true. Everything is correct. Everything on the accounting was proper, yours. And you declare under penalty of perjury. So this verification must be on here every time. Date it, you sign it as the conservator. And then typically after this page, you would put like your exhibit page, like exhibit 1 will be the attached accounting. Exhibit 2 could be your, if you were charging your time and expenses, a copy of your timesheet. If you were asking for reimbursement of expenses, it would be, that might be number 3 or it might be number 2, where you include a invoice, or now I'm talking invoice. Use Excel and just create your own spreadsheet that says, all your date, what the expense was, amount, and that's what I call an invoice. So those would be exhibits. That's if you're asking for reimbursement. If you're not, then you may not have anything but your accounting as an exhibit. Now, following this, which is not part of the class either, and is different per county. So up north, you must turn in an order. So this is only the petition telling the court what you want. This is nothing that says, judge, you order you to sign this and it becomes official, right? Up north, they require you to file the order before, or when you turn, before the hearing. Not when you turn this in, but before the hearing. Down south, they will not accept an order until after you get your minute order at the hearing, and then you will have to do an order off your minute order. So in some cases, again, if people were up here where I am, you must turn in the order prior to your hearing. Down south, you will wait until you get a minute order from the court, which is basically a recap, a very small recap of what happened during your hearing. And then you will write an order off of the minute order. You will turn that in, and then the judge takes a couple of days, but then you'll get it back. And then you know that that account is done and you're ready to go on. 2 more years would be the next time you have to file your next one. So again, first one's due in 1 year. Every time after that's every 2 years you need to turn in the accounting. So any questions, because I'm done, hun, any questions? None, wow. No questions. Okay, and Jamae, if you are attempting to do this on your own and wish to take on the challenge, if for any reason, and I'm going to give you my email address, but you would like me just to glance at it, just to make sure you're in the ballpark when you're starting it or halfway through or at the end, just to glance at it, I would be happy to do that for you and just glance at it. Now, that doesn't mean I'm going through your bank statements and making sure.
No.
No, I'm just gonna tell you, nah, you need that to reconcile, or, you know, it was funny because I just did 2 yesterday I reviewed for ProPERS from the class. And it was interesting what they did, and I understood their logic, but I was like, no, we don't do it that way. But I just kindly said, no, a better way would be to do it this way. But I'll give you my email address. It's CA California.
Mhm.
The word legal, LEGAL. And then docs, DOCS.
S as in Sam.
Sam, yes, as
Okay.
plural, at
Mhm.
Gmail. And
So-
you, go ahead.
I'm sorry. So California CA legal docs at Gmail.
I'm sorry, CA legal docs 2, the number 2 at
Number
Gmail.
2. Okay.
And then just tell me, hey, can you do me a favor? Will you glance at this? Fiduciaries also, it's an open invitation. If you guys somehow get stuck or say, hey, have you seen this happen? Or where would I do this? Or how this isn't, anything like that happens, feel free to shoot an email. It's something quick. I will do it. I don't charge. You don't have to worry about it. Something that's going to take me an hour or two, I may say, you know, I may have to charge a little bit for that, but typically it's just glancing. Am I in the right spot? Am I going the right direction? Do I do this? Do I do that? It's a simple yes, no, or, and I like to, when I'm giving examples or saying what might be wrong or how you should move things or where things would be, I'll typically take the picture itself. I'll take a copy of the picture. Like I will show you, I'll do this now. I'll take a copy of this picture. Come on, why isn't it coming up? It's not liking me today. I was trying to.
Is it in another screen?
Yeah, it didn't pop into another screen because I could typically hear it. Anyway, it will pop up as a snippet on mine, and then I'll circle this with red or colors, and then I'll put arrows that say this should go here or this is wrong date. And then sometimes with the typewriter tool, I may add in, you would want to make sure this box is checked or something like that. So I'll give you pretty detailed. It's not just words that you go, oh God, I don't even know what she said. I literally will try and do diagrams and show you pictures and things of that nature. Like, yeah, your cash is really not your cash. It comes down because it's a game, you know, or whatever the case may be. Or, oh, look, you can tell this number and this number doesn't match. They have to. So I can tell that your disbursements look a tad too high or your receipts are too low. You know, I can say things like that, or I'll say this doesn't match your inventory and appraisal or things of that nature. So I give you pictures and illustrations of what I'm saying for you to glance at.
Okay.
Otherwise, I thank you all. I hope it was helpful. I hope if you've already done this, that you got a few tiny little things that you got out of this. Again, this is a ProPER class. It's for ProPERs. The court has asked up here, us to do this because they get so many accountings that are turned in so wrong and people cannot afford attorneys. We get it. So we give this class now. We usually do it every other month. You can come as many times as you want. You can come back in a year to refresh, but the examples are exactly the same. I may use a little bit of case talk on new sample things that I've come across, but it's pretty much the same. But you can come back as many times as you want. It doesn't matter what county you're from. You just sign up and take the class. It's always going to be the third Thursday of the month during tax season, which we start February through April 15th. We do not hold the class because you can imagine why. So last time we did it was January, now we're in April, and then we will continue on through the rest of the year. So you are free to come back as many times as you want for a refresher. You're free to, if you know of somebody that is a pro-per struggling or not, refer them to the class and say, hey, go take the class. It's free. We've been doing this, I think 5 or 6, could be longer, years. And so, yes, that's it. If you have any suggestions on what could be better, what could be take away, we would love to hear it. Otherwise, wish you all a great day and you are done. Any
Thank you.
questions? You're welcome, hon. Any questions? Anybody? Last minute questions? We good? Right on. Then you guys are all free. I'm gonna leave the meeting and I wish you a great day. Thanks for coming.
Thank
Thank
you
you
very
very much.
much.
You're
Bye-bye.
welcome.